What if Rimuru's Omni-Versal Journey? By J.M. 1001. What if the supreme deity Rimuru visited different universes? Rimuru has become Veldanava's successor, but unlike Veldanava and Rimuru being bored decides to go on an adventure and interact with other universes, becoming more powerful and having fun as he does so. Chapter 5. A Gift from God. When Rimuru and Diana finally arrived back at the watchtower, everyone had gathered, curious to find out what the hell had even taken place. Diana, having been up for 20 hours straight, was currently having a hard time keeping her patience while the other members of the Justice League crowded around the pair, bombarding them with questions. Seeing her struggling, Rimuru was about to step in an attempt to draw the attention away from Diana, hopping to give her a moment to escape the chaos. However, the pair were saved from the onslaught of questions when Superman, Batman, and the Martian Manhunter suddenly showed up, hopping for answers. Seeing the arrival of the 3 original Justice League members, everyone else began to disperse back to their jobs. Superman was the one to speak for the group. "Sorry, Diana, I'm sure you're tired, but we're gonna need a debriefing." Surprisingly, though, Diana seemed okay with it as she too stated, "No, that's okay. I too am curious to learn more." So with that decided, Rimuru and Diana followed quietly behind as Superman, Batman, and the Martian Manhunter led the way to the conference room. Upon their arrival, the Flash, Cyborg, and Green Lantern were already sat, waiting patiently for everyone. So after everyone took their seats, Rimuru started by first apologizing. "First, I would like to start by apologizing to you all. Not only have I caused you all great duress, but I have also kept Diana away from her duties, and for that I can only apologize." Rimuru gave a humble bow as he apologized, completely surprising the heroes. The stunned heroes couldn't believe a god would bow his head to them, with Superman frantically trying to convince Rimuru it was no big deal. "Please raise your head, sir. There's no need to apologize. Everything has turned out perfectly fine, and in the end, no one was hurt." Diana too chimed in, as she also frantically tried to get Rimuru to lift his head. "Please, Lord Rimuru, there is no need to apologize. I went with you of my own accord." Rimuru accepted their pleading and went back to his original position. It was then that Batman, trying to change topics, asked outright, "So what actually happened down there?" Batman's question had apparently opened a can of worms, as multiple people gave their own perspective on the matter. Green Lantern, "Seriously, what did you guys do? It looked absolutely nuts from the watchtower." The Flash, "You should have seen it from the ground. Even at 50 miles out, it was unmissable." After waiting for everyone to calm down a bit, Rimuru went on to happily explain, "Well, let me first inform you all that your efforts haven't been in vain today. I have succeeded in draining away the power source that Darkseid was searching for here, meaning even if he does come back and manages to beat you all, he will never be able to obtain the anti-life equation." The Justice League all looked at each other completely gobsmacked. Never in their wildest dreams did they ever think this was even a possibility. Diana, who was the only one that was there to witness these events, could no longer hold back her curiosity as she asked, "If you don't mind me asking, what was that other black energy you absorbed?" Some of the other Justice League members were confused by Diana's words. Having not been there themselves, they had just assumed that the dark energy they saw before was this anti-life that Rimuru spoke of. However, quelling that thought, both the Martian and Batman went on to state, "Martian Manhunter, no, that wasn't it. Moments before that swirling black mass appeared, the watchtower had picked up a volcanic anomaly coming from Diana and Rimuru's position." Batman, "And with Rimuru confirming our suspicions just now, we can now say with absolute confidence that the swirling black vortex was something entirely different." Rimuru just sat listening with keen interest, a small smirk forming on his face as he thought to himself, "Ooh, how intriguing." It was then that Rimuru finally decided to interject, I must say I'm very impressed. To deduce so much from so little. Impressive. Well, I can't tell you too much, but I can tell you this. No matter when or where you go, it will always be there. The Justice League were confused by Rimuru's speech, with Batman trying to get more answers. Care to elaborate on that? What was that energy source, and what do you mean it's always there? Rimuru just laughed at the group before stating, I can't just hand out the secrets of the universe willy-nilly. If you want to know more, then seek the answers yourselves. However, I will give you all a word of warning. The answers you seek may lead to doom. With the ominous message being delivered, the Justice League were unsure of their next course of action as they sat in lingering silence. However, the one to break this awkward silence was, of course, none other than Rimuru, the one who caused it. Well, if you all don't mind, I think I'm gonna go enjoy a shower. Rimuru didn't give anyone time to respond, opting to leave the Justice League members to discuss among themselves. Although their meeting didn't continue for very long after Rimuru had exited, it was decided that for now, this topic would be tabled for a later date, after everyone had some time to process what was mentioned. When Rimuru arrived back at the room he was previously given the day before, after jumping into the shower, Rimuru went on to ask Seal to give her full analysis of this new energy she had created. Rimuru, Seal, how's your analysis coming? Seal, good, master. Would you like to hear my full findings? Rimuru agreed, and so Seal began her analysis. This new energy source created from the combination of anti-life and dark matter has formed something truly unique. Further tests have proven its capabilities for destruction, releasing a more chaotic version of energy comparable to when a star explodes. Other tests have shown that when directly integrating this power into an individual, that individual shows absurd levels of strength without the use of skills. However, it also appears this power will be unique from individual to individual and can't be copied unless the individuals share the same genetic makeup. Rimuru, I see. That is very interesting indeed. Knowing you though, I'm sure you have more to tell me. Seal, Master is correct. I have already created a skill for Master's use called Star of Destruction, Zeno. The skill has two main functions. The first is to create a destructive force with the power of a dying star or universe, depending on Master's magicule output. The second function is to create superpowered individuals or grant a new power to individuals without the use of skills. Rimuru, sounds interesting. Let's test it out real quick. So materializing a clone, Rimuru then joined Seal in his imaginary space. Wanting to see just what this new skill was capable of, Rimuru outstretched his arm and activated Zeno for the very first time. In that instant, a black and orange energy surged forward, forming into a ball in his hand. When the size of the ball had reached about the same size as Rimuru himself, he fired this ball of energy a few miles away from himself until its sudden explosion. The explosion was so great, so intense, it was like a nuclear bomb went off right in their faces. Of course, Rimuru and Seal were perfectly unharmed, with a multi-layer barrier activated and already having resistances to these types of attacks. But nonetheless, it had certainly surprised Rimuru, and after marveling at Seal's creation, Rimuru then turned to Seal and stated, "Impressive as always. I only infused a tiny trace of my magicules into that, and it's already this destructive." Rimuru then patted Seal's head as he continued complimenting her handiwork. "Well done, Seal. You've truly outdone yourself yet again." Seal still struggled with accepting compliments from Rimuru as she began looking down at the ground embarrassed, her cheeks flushed bright red. Seeing this, Rimuru couldn't help but find Seal adorably cute, and decided Seal needed a little reward for her long efforts. So, Rimuru gently caressed his finger under Seal's chin before slightly lifting her face up in order to gaze into her eyes. Seeing Seal shyly look up at him with her beautiful red eyes, Rimuru couldn't help himself as he implanted a kiss. Seal completely melted into Rimuru's touch. For her, there was no greater pleasure. Rimuru was the one to break the kiss, only to seductively whisper into Seal's ear, "You've been working very hard, my love." The following day when the pair awoke, Seal was the one to ask, "What's the plan for today, master?" "Rimuru, I think it's high time we moved on. After yesterday, it's only a matter of time before the real gods of this multiverse show up seeking answers, and I don't particularly feel like telling them it's because we're traveling." Seal, good point. With the two in agreement, the pair clothed themselves and departed to make their announcement. Stopping by the main control deck, the couple found Cyborg there working diligently. As the pair approached, Cyborg noticed the couple and nervously greeted the pair. Good morning, your majesties." "Wait, was that right?" Seeing the stumbling Cyborg made Seal and Rimuru giggle, with Rimuru saying, "Ahaha, that's all right, Cyborg. No need to worry about formalities. Actually, I was wondering if you could call Diana and Superman over for us. We are planning on leaving soon and felt like saying our goodbyes." Cyborg was surprised to hear the couple were leaving, but also feared where they would be going. "Oh, you guys are leaving already. All right, I'll call the other members over now." Cyborg then called all of the original members of the Justice League over, telling them it was urgent. With Cyborg telling everyone it was urgent, everyone had gathered rather quickly, thinking it was an actual emergency, only to see Cyborg at his desk while Rimuru and Seal stood next to him. Seeing everyone gathered so quickly and with serious expressions plastered all over their faces, Rimuru couldn't help but turn to Cyborg as he asked, "What the hell did you tell them to get them so worked up? We just wanted to say goodbye, not send them off to war." Cyborg just sheepishly scratched the back of his head while trying to move on. So after quickly explaining to the group that there was no actual problem, everybody calmed down. Rimuru then went on to state, "The reason we called you all here is to say goodbye. Me and Seal will be carrying on with our journey." The Justice League members were all a bit surprised by the sudden news, although there may have been a few who were a bit relieved by the prospect. However, Superman was respectful, stating, "While it's a shame you two can't stay any longer, it's been a pleasure to meet you both." Superman then put his hand out for a handshake, to which Rimuru did the same. While her time with the pair had been brief, Diana felt a bit disheartened by the sudden announcement. Rimuru had already opened her eyes to so much in the span of barely any time at all. While she desperately wanted them to stay, she knew she could not ask that of them. So, trying to make the most of things, Diana sincerely asked the couple, "Would you at least let us send the two of you off properly?" After hearing Diana's imploring, Rimuru looked to Seal, wondering what she thought, only to get a gentle smile and a light nod of approval. So with that agreed, all the members of the Justice League were called upon to gather in the control center to see Rimuru and Seal off. With every single member of the Justice League currently gathered, it was only right that Diana, who had spent the most time with the pair, say the final goodbye. "As much as I wish you two could stay, I know I could never ask that of you. I only wish to say thank you." Diana gave a courteous bow as she said her thanks. Rimuru and Seal both shared a satisfied glance before Rimuru's gentle voice rang out, "Diana, daughter of Zeus, please rise." Diana did as was asked, slightly confused by the sudden change in tone from Rimuru. Rimuru waited for Diana to stand back upright before continuing his speech. "I have a gift for you, Diana. This is for all your hard work in supporting us." Rimuru then waved his hand over Diana, causing her armor to suddenly glow with a bright gold aura. Diana was amazed as she examined herself. Rimuru then went on to explain what exactly he had done. "This armor will always protect you. No weapon can pierce it. No magic will damage it. Your armor is now the most durable thing in the entire multiverse." Diana was utterly speechless, along with everyone else in the room. However, immediately upon gaining some clarity, Diana kneeled to Rimuru, giving her thanks but expressing concerns. "I am truly undeserving of such an award." Rimuru and Seal half expected Diana to react in such a way. However, deciding on the tough shit, deal with it, approach, Rimuru turned around and seemingly cracked a part of reality like glass as he opened a portal to continue their journey. Before leaving everyone, Rimuru gave all the Justice League members one last piece of advice before waving his goodbye and disappearing as if they were never there to begin with. You're all good people. Never lose that. After entering the portal, Seal returned back to Rimuru's soul and went on to ask, "Where to next, Master?" "Rimuru, wherever you want, my love." Seal understood. And with that, Rimuru and Seal departed the DC universe on the road to their next journey. Chapter 6. Arrival in the MCU. And this is set near the end of Avengers Endgame. We arrive at a battlefield. The Avengers only moments ago had achieved their long goal and brought back everyone that had vanished 5 years ago. Now with their roster fully restored, they are in the fight of their lives against Thanos and his entire army. The Avengers are currently doing everything in their power just to keep the Infinity Stones out of Thanos' grasp. With the literal fate of their universe at stake, the Avengers are now stuck playing a death game of hot potato with the Infinity Stones, passing them off to one another whenever the enemies become too overwhelming for one to bear. Captain America, ever the voice of reason, spoke out through his comlink. "We need to get these stones back to where they came from before Thanos gets them." Banner was next to speak out. "Thanos just destroyed our only way of returning these stones." Suddenly, Ant-Man stated, "That wasn't our only time machine," pressing the unlock button on his van keys, causing an annoying horn to start ringing throughout the battlefield. Steve was quick to ask upon hearing the van's horn, "Does anyone see a van?" Valkyrie, flying overhead on her Pegasus, responded, "I do, but you're not gonna like where it is." The van in question was in the heart of enemy territory. "Steve, Ant-Man, get there and power up that van. These stones are coming to you and they're coming fast." "Ant-Man, we're on it, Cap." Wasp, who was next to Ant-Man, both shrunk and made their way to the van. The battle continued to rage on, with the Avengers giving their all to keep Thanos from the Infinity Stones. The Avengers were struggling against the relentless hordes of Thanos' armies. That is, until Captain Marvel made an epic entrance, destroying Thanos' mothership in the process and retrieving the Infinity Stones from Spider-Man. With the help of the other Avengers, Captain Marvel charged through the battlefield, flying straight for the time machine in the van. Unfortunately for everyone, however, their plans were thwarted when Thanos realized what they were attempting to do and threw his double-edged sword at the time machine, resulting in its destruction. It was then, however, just above the battlefield, that a dark ball of an unknown, ether-like substance had begun to form above the battlefield and began expanding rapidly, almost as if it were alive. The battlefield fell silent as both sides were forced to stop and observe this strange phenomenon. While everyone was left glued to the sight before them, Stark had landed next to Strange, asking him directly, "Is this any of your doing, Magic Man?" Strange was just as perplexed, answering, "This definitely isn't our doing." The strange black substance continued to expand until it covered nearly the entire battlefield. However, suddenly its growth abruptly halted. It was already too late to realize that this black substance was a portal, for when it opened, slowly a massive dark, multicolored dragon crept out until its full majestic form could be seen by all. The crowds were left completely awestruck by the beast. A mixture of amazement and fear had washed over everyone present. The dragon then opened its wings wide, revealing what looked to be the vast omniverse reflected in its wings. The sight alone was breathtaking enough that it left the onlookers in a state of complete astonishment. However, it was then when Strange and all the other sorcerers began to bow in reverence to the dragon. Those that witnessed this were confused by the sorcerer's actions, with Tony mockingly asking Strange, What are you all doing bowing?" However, Strange wasn't exactly in a joking manner as he replied, "Exactly. Something all of you should be doing if you knew what was good for you." It was then when the dragon raised its neck up high, and in a bright divine light that engulfed the dragon's entire body, was soon replaced by a breathtakingly beautiful individual with long blue hair and bright golden eyes, leaving the battlefield captivated by their beauty. However, more shocking was that as soon as this being revealed itself, the infinity stones, which were currently embedded in the gauntlet, had begun to shake as if they were alive. That is, until the stones themselves completely broke free of the gauntlet and flew directly at this being. The stones then began to encircle the being before entering their body, as if they were being absorbed one after another. As this was going on, Steve approached Thor, nervously asking, "Do you have any clue who or what that is?" "Thor, I haven't a clue, but those sorcerers might." Steve looked over only to see the sorcerers all bowing in reverence and Tony talking to Strange. Neither put his mind at ease. As Thor and Steve were talking, Tony too decided to ask Strange the same thing Cap asked Thor. "Tony, okay, who is that? You all seem to know who that is." Strange was hesitant at first. After all, this was knowledge only known to official sorcerers and not easily disclosed. However, he decided otherwise considering the situation, and warily answered. Legends tell of a mystical dragon of unknown power or origins that created the multiverse and everything in it, hailed as the creator dragon. However, up until right now, it was only considered just that, a legend. Tony just looked at Strange like he had lost his mind, asking almost sarcastically, "So you're telling me that this thing is basically God, yeah?" Strange, in short, yeah. The being watched as all the infinity stones entered their body one after another, seemingly finding them mildly amusing. After which, the being then turned their gaze and looked over the battlefield, scanning over everything until their gaze met with Thanos, who was gritting his teeth in anger after watching this unknown being strip his ultimate goal away from him. The being let out a slight smirk and began charging up an unknown orange and black energy in its hand. When it was time to fire, the being spoke only one word, "Xeno." Suddenly, the energy shot out across the battlefield like weaponized light, targeting every one of Thanos' soldiers, passing through one after another at an incomparable speed. Once hit, it caused all the soldiers to shine a bright orange light out of their mouths and eyes before exploding from the inside out. This continued until Thanos was the only one left. Frantically, Thanos looked around the battlefield, only to see his men exploding into nothingness. Thanos, now feeling a sense of fear and anger, turned his gaze back to the being that caused all this, only to find the being was no longer in their original position. Thanos then began nervously looking around him in an attempt to locate the individual in question, until a small flicker of blue hair forced the mad titan to look down in front of him, only to see the being standing right before him. Thanos panicked and stepped back almost on instinct. The being, however, was motionless, seemingly not focused on anything except staring at Thanos' feet. Seeing the motionlessness of this being worried Thanos as he angrily asked the being, "What do you want?" The being stayed quiet, their gaze still locked on Thanos' feet. Thanos misunderstood the being's silence for fear and wrongly attempted to stand proudly over the being, looking down on them while stating, "Do I scare you, boy?" Until finally the being spoke, "Kneel." Thanos looked confused for a moment until suddenly his body was forced into a kneeling position. He desperately tried his best to resist his own body, but it was all futile. Thanos had to muster every bit of his strength just to look up to the being, only to see the horror of what awaited him. The being's blazing golden eyes looked down upon Thanos as if he were nothing before coldly stating, "My eyes don't look up to people like you. I only look down and you kneel to meet my eye level." The being's words stung like knives in Thanos' ego. Now enraged, he tried again to resist and stand back up with everything he had, but again, it was all futile. The being grabbed hold of Thanos' head, staring deep into his eyes as he stated, "Thanos, the Mad Titan, your actions today would have caused untold devastation across multiple universes. So, with the powers vested in me as the overlord of the Omniverse, I hereby sentence your soul to 10,000 years of purgatory before ever getting a chance to reincarnate." The being then showed Thanos a devilish smirk only he could see, before placing their hand on Thanos' head and beginning to whisper to him, "You know, while I might like punishing and tormenting individuals such as yourself, my friends in hell take breaking people like you to a whole new level. So I can promise you one thing, where you're going, by the time they're done with you, you won't even remember who or what you are. You'll be too busy wishing you were dead." Thanos' eyes widened with pure fear. However, before he could even blink, a black flame engulfed his body, burning his body and soul till there was nothing left but ashes. The being, seeing his work was done, turned around and hovered towards the Avengers, with everybody visibly worried at what would happen next.